So I'm going to talk you through the king in the field from the beginning of Tishrei until the end of Tishrei. Okay, I'm going to tell you the story of the king in the field, but I'm not just going to talk about the king in the field. We're going to follow the mashal through from the beginning until the very, very end. And after I go through the mashal, I'm going to explain to you how all of this applies to the nimshal. This is what my plan is, okay? This is the story of the king in the field. The story of the king in the field is that there is a civilization, there is a society, there's a group of people who live together. And everybody understands that if you have a civilization, if you have a society, if you have a group of people living together, they don't all do the same things. You can't have a nation of shoemakers, no such thing. Can't have a nation of kings. For a civilization to function, you have to have different people who are in different roles, who do different things, and they jointly contribute to the health and the success of the entire civilization. That's how it has to be. You have prominent people, you have people who are less prominent, you have people who are taking out the garbage, but everybody is important. It cannot be a civilization where you have missing pieces or you have extra pieces. In a civilization, everybody is important. And the king sits in a palace and governs the entire community. He concerns himself with everything. The king has a big picture. The king understands why you need every single person. The king doesn't look at any of his citizens and say, he's a waste, he's vestigial, he's extra, he's redundant. The king sees why each member of his community, each member of his nation is necessary, because they do different things. They fill different niches, they do different roles, and collectively they create a society, collectively they create a civilization. So the king sits in his palace, and he's surrounded by sodim and nichbadim, by prominent people who are in charge of different departments. But the king's eye is on the prize. The king doesn't see this department or this department, this department. The king sees the total picture. He sees the whole civilization. And he's involved with every group of people, with every department, based on what they are involved with and what they need and the advice that they need and the direction that they need. But the king has a big picture. And one of the things that the king figures out is that the people who, in terms of the community, are on the lowest level, are the most important. Who is the most important in any community? And of course the answer is the ones who are most important in any community are those who feed the community. A nation cannot live without bread. They can live without diamonds, they can live without pearls, they can live without a jewelry store, but they can't live without bread. And farmers who produce food are not sophisticated people. They're not honorable citizens, they're simple people. In fact, they don't even live in the city, they live outside of the city. But the king is acutely aware, the king is very, very aware that whether they're on the very high level or the very low level, first of all, every member of the civilization is vitally important. And second of all, the people who are viewed as the bottom of the totem pole, the farmers who live outside of the town, if they stop producing bread, the whole civilization collapses. And he's very aware of this. So the king sits in his palace, surrounded by a lot of chachomim, a lot of big machers, and the palace itself is very sophisticated. But the king sees to the edge of the country, to the very, very edge. And he sees that the people living at the furthest perimeter, the farthest away from the palace, are in a way the most important. And the king has to make them aware of this. The king wants that those people living the farthest away from the palace should know that in the palace they matter. In the palace they're important. They may not think very highly of themselves. Other people may not think so highly of themselves. But the king knows that the people living at the farthest edge of the community are in a way the most important. So he visits them. Once a year the king leaves the palace. He doesn't wander the streets of the city. He doesn't meet with the big machers. You know why he doesn't meet with them? Because the big machers, the king gets too friendly. They're going to start thinking that they could be the king also. And they're going to start thinking that maybe they should make a revolution. Maybe they do better than the king. Farmers don't have such thoughts. Why? Because they're farmers. They're prosta mensch, simple people. So the king departs from the palace, takes off the big day malchus, takes off the royal garb, and disposes of his honor guard and his entourage and all of the things that decorate a king to make people around him awe him, be in awe of him, respect him. And he comes into the field like a farmer. He shows up in the field. When the king comes to the field, he doesn't come with a big trask. He doesn't come with a lot of people. He doesn't come with a lot of noise. He comes like a pushta person. And the farmers see a person that's unfamiliar, that doesn't live in this area. They've never seen him before. And they're wondering who he is, and they start to talk to him. Anyway, somebody fondly says, this is the king. And the other guy says, it's impossible. The king would never come here. The king is in the palace. The king wears big diargomon. He wears special clothing. He's surrounded by an entourage. This guy looks like one of us. No, I'm telling you, this is the king. I saw his picture in the paper. Anyway, they approach this person, and it turns out to be the king, and they engage in conversation. The king is very friendly, very, very nice. No airs, no gaiva. And he's also very wise, and he's very generous. He's giving counsel, giving advice. He's giving direction, he's giving encouragement, and most importantly, he's letting these farmers know that the service they provide is very important. And they should never think that because they're far away from the Ir Abira, they're far away from the capital, and far away from the king, that people forgot about them. They have to understand that the whole civilization depends on them. And the king hangs around. He doesn't come for 15 minutes, he comes for 30 days. It's an incredible amount of time for a melech to leave his palace and to hang out plus the people. So what do the farmers do? You have different kind of farmers. You have smart farmers and you have silly farmers. If a farmer has seichel, he follows the king around every second. And he eats up every word the king says. And of course, the king's words are full of wisdom and advice that are going to help him run his farm and take care of his family and remain loyal to the king. If the guy is not so smart, so on weekends, when he's not busy in the field, he hangs out with the king. If he's Gora Tipish, if he's really a fool, he goes to see the king one time, he shakes his hand and he goes back. Why? The king isn't saying to the people, come hang out with me. The king isn't saying to the people, you better come and visit, or else it's considered the Merida Malchus. The king's a nice guy. So everybody approaches the king based on how much they understand this is special. Some appreciate that it's special to such an extent that they drop everything. And some barely spend the day with the king. Why? The king is not demanding it. The king stays in the field for 30 days. The farmers are very friendly, very comfortable. The king and them are on the same level. They talk the same language. They want the same things. And then the king's leaving. And when the king leaves, the people from the farm are following him. They malava him. And then the king puts on Big Day Malchus, puts on his royal outfit. And he surrounds himself with an entourage of honor guard. And all of a sudden he's the king. And he inspires awe and fear. And he's not so nice, and he's not so friendly, and he's not so easy. And the farmers are following behind the king. And now the king is not available. The king is the king. They come into the city, and the people from the city come out to greet the king. So now you have a whole procession. You have the people from the city who come in to greet the king. You have the people from the farms who are following behind the king. And the king is very aloof. The king is not anymore so warm and friendly and so cordial. He's a melech. He's very far removed. The king comes to the door of the palace, to the gates of the palace, and he turns around. And he makes an announcement. The people of the city have to stop here. The farmers can enter into the palace. The people of the city, the Achei, the sophisticated folk, they can't go any further. The farmers whom the king visited in the field, they're entitled to come into the palace. So they enter into the palace. So it's like exchanging visits. The king visited them in the field, and now the farmers are visiting the king in the palace. The problem is that when they visit the king in the palace, they're expected to behave as you're supposed to behave in a palace. They're not conditioned. In the palace, everything is very precise. Movements are very exact, and the way you walk and the way you talk and how you sit, they're very unprepared for this whole palatial experience. So by mistake, things happen. You look at a beautiful painting and you touch it and it falls off the wall. You touch a vase and it breaks. They don't know. Farmers in a palace is a bad fit. They're not conditioned for how precise, how fine one must be in order to live in a palace. But the king invited them. They're in the palace with the king. So they're in the palace and they're having a very hard time acclimating. It was so much more geschmack when the king was in the field and they were able to act like farmers and be farmers. And the Eibishter, the Melech, the king, related to them where they were. Now the king says, now you're in my palace, you have to act like people are supposed to act in the palace. So of course the way it plays out is those people who spent more time with the king when he was in the field have become a little bit finer, so they have an easier time navigating the palace. Those people who spent less time with the king in the field, they have a much more difficult time navigating life in the palace. But they all, the peasants are in the palace, right? The king was in the field, now the peasants are in the palace. And of course what happens is they get used to it. The first day is a disaster. So many things happen that are embarrassing, but if you hang around the palace long enough, you learn to dress like you're supposed to dress in a palace. You learn to talk like you're supposed to talk in a palace. You learn to eat like you're supposed to eat in a palace. You learn how to stand and how to sit and how to walk. Everything you learn, you slowly but surely figure out how you're supposed to behave in an environment which is royal, which requires a very, very high level of exactitude and precision and sophistication. So sure, they get comfortable. They're good. As soon as they get comfortable, the king makes a big banquet. He invites all of the farmers. He says, "Geht gesundheit, go, go." Where should we go? Where should we go? Go back to the farm. Your farmers go back to the farm. They say, wait. We're not farmers. We're the king's friends. We were farmers. You came to us. We didn't invite you. We didn't expect you. We never dreamed you would show up. You came by yourself. And you hung around with us, which was wonderful. Then you invited us into the palace, which was very, very hard. We finally become accustomed to living in a palace. Why are you sending us away? And the king says to the subjects, the king says to these farmers, something very, very, very important. The king says to these farmers, I want you to understand. What are the king doing in a field? Kings belong in palaces. Kings belong in environments that are very sophisticated, that are very sublime, that are very high, where the engagements and the involvements and the interests are lofty and principled and ideal and exact. Why did I visit you in the field? Why? So the king says, I visited you in the field because you live so far away from the palace. It's possible, chas v'shalom, you could forget that there is a king and that there is a civilization and that you serve. So I came to the field that you should know that there's a melech that you work for, that you serve. And that you should understand that the service that you provide, you make bread. That's all you do is make bread. You're not a naked magot. You're not stringing pearls. You're not, building buildings or expanding companies. You're making bread. But the entire civilization depends on the bread that you make. So I visited you in the field. I came down to your level to inform you that I know about you and that I want you to know about me and that what you do is important. And then I invited you into my palace. And I raised you up to my level. When I raised you up to my level, you stopped being farmers. You became king-like. But the only reason I came down to you and then I raised you up to me is not that you should remain in the palace, but that you should leave the palace and go back to the farm in the field, do your work as a simple farmer with their understanding that what you do feeds the entire civilization. And the king says to the farmers, it was very nice hanging around with you, but the whole reason for the kiruv, the whole reason for the favoritism that I showed you is not that you should stop being farmers, is that you should understand that even though you're far away from the palace, what you do affects the palace, and it affects the entire civilization, and it's very, very important. Go. And they leave. The farmers go, they leave the palace. By the way, these two parts of the Machon says in Chassidus, but now comes the imagination, the license to say drush. So the farmers leave. They walk out of the palace. What do you think happens next? They leave the palace to go home. And there's a disappointment. This is not how they saw it playing out. They never asked the king to come to them. He came on his own. They certainly never asked to be invited into the palace. And the king invited them on his own. Being kicked out of the palace with all the good words about how important what they do is still disappointing. It was a lot geshmaka to be with the king in the palace. It was even geshmaka when the king was in the field. And now they're going to go back to the field and the king stays in the palace. The king doesn't go with them to the field. The king stays in the palace. So there's a disappointment. There's a bad taste. Why did the king do this? But they get over that. And when they get over that, what's left is a bottom line. The bottom line is the king likes us. The king likes us enough to come close to us, to bring us close to him in a way that he would never do for the Sodom and the Nechbadim, for the people of the city, for fear that they would revolt, you understand? The king favors us. And he considers us worthwhile enough and important enough to break all the rules of Malchus, to visit us and then have us visit him. And for this they have to be thankful. So instead of going back to the fields, they celebrate. They start a farbrengen of eating and drinking and singing and dancing and celebrating. What are they celebrating? They're celebrating the fact that the king loves them. They're celebrating the fact that the king gave them this special attention. Now you have to understand, think about a farmer. A farmer is a simple person. You take a simple person, you put him into a palace where there's an enormous amount of pressure, and he's expected to behave perfectly. Every movement is exact. Farmers are not used to living in palaces, and they're under so much stress. They shouldn't make a mistake, they shouldn't break anything, they shouldn't walk wrong, they shouldn't talk. But when they leave the palace and they begin to celebrate, all of that tension, all of that stress that they experience when the palace comes out in the Kava Simcha. It bursts out of them. All the pressure that they felt when they were in the palace now spills out in this incredible joy. It's unbelievable joy. The king favors us. The king thought us important enough to visit us and to bring him into his palace. And they fabring. There's a simcha. They don't go home right away. They celebrate the special opportunity that they have with the king. But remember, they've already been told, go home. They've already been told to go back to the farm. They just don't rush. They celebrate. They celebrate, and they celebrate, and they dance, and they sing, and they eat, and they drink, and they dance, and they sing, and they have no more koyach. They can't dance anymore. They're used up. They're exhausted. So they stop. And they collapse on the ground in exhaustion. And now there's a second opportunity. When they left the palace, at first they were disappointed, and then they were happy that the king loves them. But after they celebrated for a week, how much the king loves them, and they can't celebrate anymore, they stop. These peasants, these farmers, have a new realization, a new insight, a new chiddush, a new discovery. And what is that? That their schus, what makes them special, isn't that the king loves them. It's that they can do something for the king. And there's a very, very big difference between being happy about the fact that the king likes me and being happy about the fact that I can do something for the king. So an interesting set of events unfolds. They leave the palace. They celebrate for a week the fact that the king embraced them. When they stop that celebration, they make a new discovery. Something happens in their mind. They start to understand that our schus is not that the king loves us. Our schus is that there's something we can do. Kvayachal, the king needs us to provide him with bread. And then there's a second celebration. The second celebration is very different than the first celebration. It's very different. And it's more infinite. It's more believable than the first celebration. Because the first celebration, they're celebrating that the king likes them. The second celebration, they're celebrating that they can do, the Eibishter needs them, the king needs them. It's a whole different celebration on an entirely different level. And of course, with this celebration, they march back to the farms and to the fields and to the villages and to the far away, and they go back to their work. But they're very cognizant, they have a very acute awareness that there is a king, and they're not just making bread, they're making bread for a purpose. And if when they get an instruction, this year you should make rice or barley or whatever it is, they're careful to follow those instructions because they're aware that they're not just making bread, they're serving a melech. And in serving the melech, they're providing parnasa, they're providing mezonos for the entire civilization. and they're very, very important. What they do matters. And therefore the instructions that they get from the king are taken with a very different type of earnestness. This is the Machon king in the field, Machon Malach Basada. Not every single word of this says in Chassidus. I've given myself a license to embellish, but it's really the Yisod, the Yisod that Malach Basada is in the Maimorim. The king in the field is in Likutei Torah. Peasants in the palace, this is in the Rebbe's Maimorim. And the rest of it, when you hear the Nimshol, you'll understand the Mashal. This is the example, this is the illustration, this is the story of the king in the field if you tell it completely, okay? But now let me tell you how this plays out in Avodas Hashem. What does this mean? The farmers are Neshamis Beguf. The farmers are us, Jews living on this earth. We're farther away from the Eibishter Kvayachol than anything Lamaila. Malachim and the Neshamis, Neilamis Halyenim, and the earlier generations. Everybody's very close to God. We're very far away. But Yisrael Mefanesim Lavim Shabashamayim Kvayachol, the Eibishter, and the Malachim and the Neshamis Lamaila eat the bread we make. The entire creation lives. It says in the Tanya, Perek Chav Gimel, in the beginning, that the whole creation lives on the Torah and mitzvahs we do down here. So we're far away from the Melech. We're very far away from the Melech. And we're so far away from the Melech that we can forget that there's a Melech and forget that we serve a purpose, and we can get distracted. But our role is incredibly important, because the entire Seder Ishtalshlos and Kvayachol, however you understand this, but as they state, Veistach, Rabbi Yossi Paltiel, Kvayachol, the Eibishter himself, eats the food, eats the mezanos that the Jewish people down here make. So the king comes to the field. The Eibishter Kvayachol leaves the palace, and he comes down, like it says in Tanya Perek Mavov, and he goes to the place where you have the lowest of people, and he's Misyached Imohem. And the Eibishter Kvayachol leaves the palace, leaves the Elim Esal Yoinim, leaves the higher worlds, and he descends into this world to engage with us. To engage with us. And he visits the field, Malach Basada, the king in the field. Now you have to understand the nuance of the king in the field mashal. You have to understand the nuance of the mashal, the king in the field. The nuance of the king in the field mashal is that the king doesn't come looking like a king. When the king visits the field, he doesn't come in a way that's dramatic. He doesn't come in a way that wows the citizenry. He comes into the field, in the mashal, the king is also wearing overalls, like all the farmers, except that the king's overalls have no grass stains, because he never rolled in the grass, you understand? The king comes to the field on the field level. What does that mean in Avodah? In Avodah means a Bosh Tazach. When the Eibishter comes into the field in Chedesh Elul, he in no way changes our free will. Because he comes into the field in a subliminal way. He comes into the field in the kind of way that if you choose to ignore that the Melech is Basada, nothing happens. It's not awesome. The Eibishter in Chedesh Elul doesn't have a relationship with us which is overwhelming, which is pushing us and arousing us and lifting us. It's Taka, the king in the field, but it's quiet. Which of course is what the Alter Rebbe says in Likutei Torah. It's a Gili v'Gimel Midas HaRachamim, and it's Yemais HaChayil, the highest revelations, and it's a weekday. The king is in the field if you choose to approach him. And if you choose not to approach the king, to you, the king is not in the field. Because the king does not superimpose his presence on us in Elul. In Chodesh Elul is a special time. Hashem is close to the Jewish people, but his closeness to the Jewish people is like a king in the field. The choice is ours to approach the king and take advantage of this, or to ignore him. So there's an interesting idea. The Eibishter helps us and is not in any way interfering with our choice. Hashem is present in the field, Melech Basada, and because the king is in the field, we can approach the king, Rashoyim v'Yechelim, Yechelim v'Rashoyim, to approach the king. But if we choose not to approach the king, we're not going to be punished for it. We're not going to even see that we did anything wrong, because the king in the field is found in the field in a field-like way, in a subliminal way, in a hidden way. That's Melech Basada. And of course, this is the Avodah of Elul. Elul is called Chedesh HaCheshbon, We take stock of the previous year. We look at what we've done, and we make resolutions for the good year, for the new year. Habal leina v'kol Yisrael teva v'lebracha, teva nida v'niglu, in all the brachas, in all the zachen. So it's an opportunity to take stock of what we did, to identify things that we did that are wrong, that we're in a position to fix, and to work on fixing them, and fixing them in fact. The backdrop, the foundation of this tshuva, that in Chodesh Elul, we take stock of last year, we make resolutions for this coming year, and so on and so forth, is that the king is in the field. Hashem comes to us, and he's amongst us like one of us. If we don't approach him, nothing happens. If we do approach him, we see that he provides incredible assistance. He helps us a lot in the cheshbon hanefesh, and in the achlatas tevis, and in the tshuva tator, in getting ready for the new year. This is Elul. Then comes Yom Neraim. Right, of course, there's a lot of steps. There's Elul, and then there's Chayil, and then there's Yemei HaSlichas. Comes Rosh Hashanah. The king goes back to the palace. And in the palace is a whole other conduct. In the palace, the king is not he's not chavalap, he's not our buddy anymore, he's not our friend. But he invites us, the Yidden, the Neshamas Begufim, into his palace. The Malachim, the Neshamas Lamayla, they're not allowed into the palace. Like it says in the Machon, in Tanya chapter 46, you have a similar Machon. They're not allowed into the palace. But the farmers, the prosta people, the Neshamas Begufim, who are making bread, they're serving Hashem at the lowest level. But what they provide for the civilization, which is so vital, so important, they're invited into the palace. Now, what happens when you take a Yid and you bring him into the Yebishter's world? So first of all, understand that this is the basis for a few minhagim that we have about the Yom Neraim. There are a few funny customs that we have Yom Neraim. One of them is that it's acceptable for a person to take on a hidur mitzvah, to be extra frum or certain mitzvahs for the 10 days of tshuva, and then afterwards to drop it. For example, a person can take on, this has in Shulchan Aruch, take on that during Aseret Yimei Tshuva, he's not going to eat pas palter, he's only going to eat pas Yisrael, bread baked by a Jew, and after the Aseret Yimei Tshuva, he's going to go back to eating pas palter. Usually that will be called a hypocrite. If you take on a chumrah, why are you taking it on for a short time? And the answer is because the peasants are in the palace. During the Yom Neraim, Hashem invites us into his world. And because Hashem has invited us into his world, we have to acclimate to living in a palace. We're not made for palaces, we're made for farms. And it's a funny fit, and a simple Yid with the king in the palace, but that's what the Aseret Yimei Tshuva is. It's a time, and again, the expressions are, it's a gili of Yud Gimel Midas Arachamim, there's a revelation of the 13 attributes of mercy, which is brought in the Gemara. And then, of course, the Hasidic expression, that the Aseret Yimei Tshuva is called Kiruv Hamoir El Hanitzutz. That there's a proximity, there's a closeness between the source with a capital S and the star, the Eibishter and the spark. The Eibishter Kvayachal comes close to us and he includes us, he pulls us in from the top. This is why, like I said, there's a custom by Yidden that you can take on extra chumras during Aseret Yimei Tshuva, that you're going to say lechatchila, I'm only doing it for 10 days. Because we're in a palace, and in a palace we behave different. Another thing which is brought in Chassidus, and also brought in Shulchan Aruch, is that the halacha is that a whole year a person is not supposed to daven Shmoneh Esrei out loud. And davening Shmoneh Esrei out loud is called Mektani Emunah. If you daven Shmoneh Esrei and people can hear you outside Daled Amos, it's a lack of Emunah. Because it means that you don't trust that the Eibush is going to hear your praise unless you speak loud. And the Eibush can hear your praise. The Alta a Yid was very upset about something and he was screaming at the Eibush. So another guy walked by and said, "Hast geprüft mit Gutens? You know, you're angry at the Eibush. Maybe you try. Maybe you try speak to him nicely." We daven softly. During the Yom Neraim, during the Aseret Yimei Tshuva, it says in Shulchan Aruch that if a Yid feels that koil ma'oider hakavana, that if he'll daven out loud, it will enhance his tefillah, he's allowed to daven out loud. He's allowed to daven out loud that people around him can hear him. A whole year long, it's not considered good. It's a sign of a lack of emunah. That if you whisper, the Eibishter can't hear you. It's a lack of emunah. He can hear when you whisper too. The same Eibishter, the same davening in the Yom Neraim, you say, if raising your voice is going to help you, go ahead. Why? Because we're on a higher level. We're in the palace. And if I may use these oisias, we're not relating to the Eibishter with our mind, relating to the Eibishter with our neshama, with our soul. And when you relate to the Eibishter with your seichel, rather than with your neshama, with your mind, rather than with your soul, When you cry, that cry is coming min hamet, it's coming from the deepest levels of the neshama. And that's Yom Neroim. Yom Neroim. The Aseres Yemei Tshuva. The Eibishter invites us into the palace, and we live Kvayachal with the Eibishter in the palace. And for 10 days, like I said, the halacha is that we take on Hider Mitzvah, we do different things that a whole year we don't do, based on the idea that at this particular time of year, we're closer to Hashem. So we try to live Pashat more exact in all inyanim of Torah and Mitzvahs than we do a whole year, because in a palace, even a peasant figures out how you're supposed to behave in a palace, and it's uplifted. It's all on a much higher madreg. It's the Yom Neroim, Aseres Yemei Tshuva. And of course, there's a lot of particulars Yemei Tshuva. There's Rosh Hashanah, there's Aseres Yemei Tshuva, there's Yom Kippur, but we're going to skip all of those parts, okay? Then comes the end of Yom Kippur. Now something happens which a lot of people do not know. It says in the Machon from the Rebbe Marash and V'koch, and the Rebbe spoke about it in Tafshin Lamed Ches, that Motzei Yom Kippurim is v'yankev halal chadarki. Did you know? It says in the Sofas of Lekut Sichas Chelik Chof, the Sichas of Tishrei Tafshin Lamed Ches, that it's brought from the V'koch, from the Rebbe Marash, that Motzei Yom Kippur is v'yankev halal chadarki. The beginning of going back to the farm is not after Sukkot, and not after Simchas Torah, and not after Shabbos Bereishis. It's right after Yom Kippur. Right after Yom Kippur, the Eibishter says, "Get home, go home." And as I explained to you in the Machon, because the Eibishter didn't give us an Elul, where he came to the field. The Eibishter didn't give us a Yom Neroim, where he invited us into his palace, that we should remain in this Maimon Matzav. The Eibishter came to the field, and he brought us into his palace, that we should be Jews in every day of the year, in a simple day. You know, there's a great question. It's a theological question. It's a shayla, it's a kasha. We can fragen by mention. It's a great question. You could ask the question in 5 different ways, but I'll just say it this way. Is Shabbos a means to help us serve Hashem on Sunday and on Monday and on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday? Or is Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday a means for serving Hashem on Shabbos? Is Cheshvan and Kislev and Tevis and Shvat and Adar a means to help us serve Hashem better in Nisan and in Tishrei? Or is Nisan and Tishrei to help us serve Hashem in the everyday? And I assure you that if you would ask this question to different Jews from different communities, you would get very different answers. Because every community has a different sense of what the center of the Mataras Sabri, what Eibishter wants from us. But in our culture, in Chassidus, and in Chassidus Chabad, there is no doubt Hashem made Shabbos for Sunday, not Sunday for Shabbos. And Hashem made Tishrei for Cheshvan and Kislev and Tevis and Shvat and other. And Eibishter made Pesach, and he made Shavuos for the Iyar and for the Tammuz and for the Menachem and for the Elder. Eibishter made the special for the ordinary. In other words, we're down here in this world to be farmers who make bread, finished. Not to be fancy, not to live in palaces and not to be visited by kings, to make bread. And this means the Torah and mitzvahs that we do under ordinary conditions in our regular environment, as we're out, so to speak, in the field. When a Yid learns Torah and does mitzvahs every day, there are 30 gray rectangles. Of these 33, 2 of them have images of a human being. The other ones are blank with names. Oh, I see Nach Aponim. The Penim just came and went very quickly. Bin Laila Hoya, like the Kikoyan of Yaine. Bin Laila Ovar. So I don't know how many people behind it. The Kanahara Nelam. Yeah. The idea that Chassidus teaches is that the Eibishter is interested in what we do on Sunday, the Poshet life of a Yid. You're a balabas, yeah? You're a business person, or you're a professional, or whatever you happen to do for a living. But you spend so much of your time working, doing things which you either enjoy or don't enjoy, but they're not necessarily holy. And you're going to use that to bring home bread to your mishpacha, that your children can go to cheder, and that you can be mechanech your children, and give it tzedakah, and live as a yid. You should understand that the Eibishter is interested more in how we behave in our place of work. Now he behaves Shabbos in Shul. Not Chas v'Shalom that Shabbos he shouldn't behave in Shul. But the Eibishter sees us and defines us not by what we do when we separate from the world. Because in Gan Eden they do a much better job, believe me. The Eibishter sees us by what we do in the everyday. Like the famous Chassidus that everybody knows. that the Gedeila Tfilas HaMincha, Gedeila Mincha, whatever Tfilas, what the Lashon is, Shafilu Eliyahu Hanavi Leinene El B'Tfilas HaMincha. The most important davening of the day is Mincha. It's the shortest tefillah, and the Gemara says it's the most important. Why? So it says Mamar from the Friedrich Rebbe, because it's right in the middle of the workday. Before you went to work in the morning, so you're in shul. When you finish your day and you go back to Shtibel to have a shir and to learn a little bit, you're right there in shul. But with davening mincha in the middle of your workday, sometimes it's in the middle of the field, it's in a business office, sometimes you have a minyan, sometimes you don't have a minyan, you have to interrupt your asik, your preoccupation to be in front of Bnei Beisei, and talk to the Eibishter for 5 minutes or for 10 minutes, whatever mincha takes. So it's the least meaningful tefillah to us. It's the most meaningful tefillah to the Eibishter. Why? Because the Eibishter made us to make bread. And we make bread through what's called the Chassidus Birurim. We make bread by being Jews in those things that Jews and non-Jews do the same. Jews eat, non-Jews eat. Jews walk, non-Jews walk. Lyhadus. And the areas, it says in the Rambam, the regular things we do, when we do them as a Yid, we're b'mefanis Yisrael b'mefanis Avim Shebashamayim, we're providing panos for Tol Seder Ishtashlos. So when Yom Kippur finishes, the king says, go back to the farm, make bread. I came to you, I invited you to me, but Yidden are doch klug, or lazy, right, Jews. What do Jews do when they have a problem? They make another holiday, another day, eat and drink and not work, yeah? You do it, the tightness. And we have Sukkot. And Sukkot is a celebration. It's called Zman Simchaseinu. What's the Simcha of Sukkot? The Simcha of Sukkot is about the whole world, of course. But the Simcha of Sukkot is about the favoritism that the Eibishter shows for the Jewish people. Aluas ad Hashem kol goyim, shabchu kol umim, kavar aleinu chaste. The whole world lives from Sukkot, and the beginning of the living from Sukkot is Gavar aleinu chaste, the Eibishter's love that he has for the Jewish people. Sukkot is a celebration, the special relationship is between the Eibishter and Yidden. There's a lot more to say on this subject, but this is the nekudah that I want to focus on. And you should know that it says in Teres Abal Shem Tov that the cloud of smoke that the Kohen Gadol used to make Yom Kippur in the Holy of Holies becomes the Schachar of Sukkah. In other words, there's a carryover from the Avodah of Yom Kippur to the Avodah of Sukkah, except that on Yom Kippur it's Yemei HaIyum, Yemei HaDin, and in Sukkot it's Yemei HaSimcha. It's the same energy which is spilled over into the form and into the language of joy. And even in the Beis HaMikdash, I always point this out to people. What did they sing by Simchas Beis HaSheva? The Gemara says, what did they sing by Simchas Beis HaSheva? Sukkot. They sang about Tshuva. The tzaddikim used to say, Ashrei Yalduseinu Shalei Bisha Ziknaseinu. Tzaddikim said, fortunate that during our young years we didn't do things to embarrass our elder years. And the Balei Tshuva used to say, Ashrei Ziknaseinu Shekipra Al Yalduseinu. Thank God that during our senior years we did tshuva and atoned for the mistakes, the sillinesses that we did during our younger years. And then of course, Elu ve'elu emrim ashrei mi shalechato mi shechata yasham. Which means in English, it's always better not to do an Aveda, but if you do an Aveda, you can do tshuva. This is the celebration of Sukkot. The Eibishter loves us. Then of course in Chassidus Chabad, the optimum day, the highest day of the whole Tishrei, Chas Hashem Lubavitch, should be like everybody else. It was a minig Yisrael Teiri. If the whole world says that the most important day is Purim, so on Lubavitch is Purim, Cotton, Shushan Purim, always have another story, yeah? Everybody else puts themselves on the right side. We put it by Hakatziyah. Whatever everybody else does, we do different, yeah? What's the most important day in Tishrei in the Welt? Hoshana Rabbah. It's the end of the judgment. What's by Chassidim the most important day of the year? Shmini Atzeres. Most Jewish Shmini Atzeres sleep. They are up a whole night for a week. Shmini Atzeres dafür schlafen. In Chassidus, Shmini Atzeres is the optimum day of Tishrei. You know why? Because Shmini Atzeres, you stop to dance. And it says in Chassidus, when you stop to dance, you have a chance to catch your breath. And the word Atzeres, amongst other things, means ha'akava, to hesitate, to pause, to interrupt. And Chassidus says that when Shmini Atzeres happens, and we stop the celebration of Sukkot, we have a realization. We are able to internalize what the king gave us. The fact that the king came to the field, and the king invited us into his palace. and we celebrate having been in the king's palace because the king loves us. Now we have a moment to take it all in, and we make a discovery. The discovery is that the reason to be happy is not that the king loves us. The reason to be happy is that we can do something Laman HaMelech, a Yid down here. In Elam Hazeh Agash V'Achumri, who learns Torah, does mitzvahs, is giving the Eibush Parnasa, food, whatever that means. Rabbi Yossi Paltiel, a Yid Kvayochel Mefanos Lavim Shpashamayim. Simchas Torah is the celebration of that. So you have the joy of Sukkot, you have the joy of Simchas Torah, and in between there's the pause of Shmini Atzeres. And the joys are very, very different. The joy of Sukkot is Hashem loves me. The joy of Simchas Torah is I can do something for an Eibishter. What I do matters to the king. You know, there's a whole story. I don't have to tell the Sasipur, but there was a Chassid did a big thing. So his rebbe asked him, "What do you want as a schar for the big thing that you did?" He says, "My schar is Ashbel to be your shamish." There's a Polish rebbe. He says, "Not any. You could ask me for millions, I would give you." But he was never Chabad Chassid. What's the greatest thing you can do in your relationship with your king? Serve him. Simchas Torah is a simcha, which is it's a derabbanan, it's not a derais. Simchas Torah is not mentioned in the Tanakh, it's not mentioned in the Mishnah, it's not mentioned in the Gemara. It's hard to know where Simchas Torah even began. Simchas Torah, the Jewish people are celebrating not what the Eibishter gives them in terms of their relationship. Simchas Torah, Yidden celebrate the opportunity of being a Yid, that I can do something for HaKadosh Baruch. And then, of course, the way the story finishes, that when the second dance finishes and the second celebration finishes, you go back to the farms. And of course, the most important point that's always brought out when it comes to Tishrei is that we take from Tishrei with us. You don't leave the Tishrei behind, you take the Tishrei along. Or as the Rebbe says always, as kum tzu, you don't go through, you collect. Like by Sira Se'emi, you don't say, Ayim Yom Shlishi, you say Shloisha Yom, Ayim Yom Nevi, you say Arba Yom. It's not the third day, it's 3 days. It encompasses the whole event. And the same is true here, that the season of Elul and Tishrei is a time of the Eibishter being close to us and us being close to him, Kirav Amoral and Itzut. And then, of course, there's the Avodah that's associated with this. But the culmination of the whole Tishrei is celebrating the fact that we're going to go away from the Yomim Ne'royim, not just with an understanding that the Eibishter loves us, but with the understanding that we can do things L'man Hashem. So how does Tshuva fit into this picture? Where did I mention Tshuva? Tshuva fits into this picture automatically. It's a byproduct. When you understand what the Eibishter is doing in our relationship with him, you automatically understand what you want to do in your relationship with him. In Elul, it's called Tshuva Tata, it's a lower Tshuva, it's about Avedis. And in the Yom Noraim, it's a higher Tshuva, it's called the Tshuva Allah. Tshuva Allah is not about Avedis. Tshuva Allah is about coming closer to the Melech. During a Seder Yemei Tshuva, we're not coming closer to the Melech. So this is my Fabrengen / Shir. We journeyed through Tishrei, and I gave you the Machon, and I gave you a little bit of the Nimshal. The point is this. You know, here's another way of giving perspective to this. Yeah, we say L'David HaShameri. And by the way, this is really also strange. We say L'David HaShameri for 51 days, beginning the first day, the Achei Temimim, till Hoshana Rabbah. Shmini Atzeres, we don't say L'David HaShameri. The Welt says L'David HaShameri, Shmini Atzeres. I don't know whether they say it the first day, the Achei. In other words, they may also say it only for 51 days like we do. And the number 51, by the way, is also very precise. And it's very strange, because Al Pisvara, we should say L'David HaShameri, Shmini Atzeres, because we, Chabad, consider the Shmini Atzeres more important than the Hoshana Rabbah. The ganze Welt considers the Hoshana Rabbah more important than Shmini Atzeres. We stop saying the Shmini Rabbah, they stop saying the Shmini Atzeres. You figure it out. I mean, it's cautious. Yeah? But every Kehillah will take a different pasuk and love the Shammai to say it's the most important. What's the most important pasuk? Some people say, what do you mean, Lulei, Hemanti, Lulei, Deisias, Elul, every community has another favorite pasuk. I think the David HaShameri has enough psukim that every single kehillah, Sfardim and Ashkenazim and Chassidim and Misnagdim and Taiminer and Italians and every kind of Jew has said, this is my favorite pasuk. Everybody has their own favorite pasuk. What's the most important pasuk in the David HaShameri in Chabad? What pasuk in the David HaShameri is the neshama, is the real reason why we say this Pedic for these 51 days, beginning with the first day of Achei Temimim till Shana. And the answer is L'cho Omar Libi. That's the Chabad pasuk. It's a boring pasuk. L'cho Omar Libi Bakshu Fone Es Penecha Deshem Avakish. To you speaks my heart. And he says, Bakshu Fone, seek my face. And then the answer is Es Penecha Avakish. I'm going to look for the face of God. So Mi Amalami. Who is saying to whom L'cho Omar Libi Bakshu Fone? And who answers back Es Penecha Avakish? And the answer is that every Jew has what's called a chitzonius halev and a pnimius halev. We have an outer heart and an inner heart. What's the difference between the outer heart and the inner heart? The outer heart is connected to the seichel, to the mind, to the conscious person. The inner heart is connected to the neshama, to the soul. And when it comes, Elo, l'cho amalibi, the inner heart speaks to the outer heart. The subconscious, the neshama of the yid speaks to the seichel of the yid. And says, Bakshu Fone, look for my face. A whole year you use your mind and your heart and your senses. You serve Hashem as a person. Now, Bakshu Fone, look for the Pnimius, look for the Eibishter. And the outer heart answers the inner heart as Penecha Avaya Avakish. I'm going to seek the Pnimius. The whole idea of this season is that all year long we serve Hashem with our faculties that we have as people, our mind, our heart, our senses. That's what we do every day. Elo, I said it's made tshuva. The Dalal Yom between we put them in Sukkot, and then Sukkot and Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah and Shabbos Bereishis and Zayin Cheshvan. We serve Hashem with the neshama. What we call in culture yechida, the pnimius. The outer comes Elo, and the neshama dials up the brain and says, "Today, Bakshu Fanai." Don't relate to the Eibishter with your mind and your heart. Try to look for the neshama. Try to look for the Jew inside. What's the difference in the Jew outside and the Jew inside? The Jew outside has to have proof. The Jew outside has to have an understanding. The Jew outside has to be in control. And the inner Jew is one with God, doesn't have to learn anything, doesn't have to prove anything. It's inherent, it's innate. This is a season of neshama. In El, it's on a level of Malach Basadeh. In the Yom Neroyim, it's on a level of Vesach Eicherim Ba'armen HaMelech. And Sukkot is the celebration of the Ava from the Eibush at the Yidden. And Simchas Torah is the celebration of the Shlichus, which the Eibush, it's all happening on a higher level. During this season, it's an neshama time. We need to say, we're all Jewish from a different place. We're Jewish from inside rather than outside. And of course, the point is, it's an opportunity. In other words, if all year we want to be good Jews, now it's so much easier. The environment and the support that we have from the fact that the Eibishter is close to us, whether it's Melech Basadeh, or it's Kirev HaMoyer Lanitz, it's peasants in the palace, or it's the Simcha of Sukkot, the Simchas Torah, this is a season when Hashem makes it easier for us to relate to Him on a level which is above the mind. And we have to take advantage of it, you understand? By doing tshuva. So when I started this Chassidus, the king is in the field no matter what. But it's not a deraisa to be an idiot. You understand that the king is in the field. The king is in the field whether we turn and look at him or don't turn and look at him. But as a result of the king in the field, we're able to do things consciously, deliberately, behaviorally, for self-improvement, for growth, which is called tshuva, that a whole year we cannot do. Because we're shooting from we're using a different machine. We're operating from a neshama level. In Elo, it's still subliminal, it's hidden. So it's called tshuva tata. It's about avedis. And the Yom Neroyim, it's the peasants are in the palace. Hashem has charged us up. So we're able to do a tshuva that's called tshuva elah. Tshuva elah means relating to the king, to the Eibishter, just having an involvement with Hashem. It's not about avedis, it's about tshuva. It's about so, what do I say? I hope I taught you something. I'm a teacher. Really, I'm more of a teacher than I am a fabrenger. If I inspired you, it's gar good. And if I inspired you, so the Eibush to helfen, that it should influence you, because that'll be a raya that it was Dvarim HaYetzim and Alev, and maybe it'll influence me also. We learned, I'm teaching this, I didn't make anything up. The Mishalom I embellish, but everything else I said says in the Maimorim. About Elul, about Rosh Hashanah, about Yom Kippur, about Sukkot, Simchas Torah. It's good. It's a good speech, right? Is that I didn't make it up. If I made it up, you would see in the quality. This is my other. So I want to wish everybody and Hashem should protect every Jew Begashmis, Beruchti, V'chol Mokum Shehem, and Modechadens to the Gula Shleim and Nachfar Tovshin Pei Alpha. Someone sent around on the WhatsApp that the Divrei Chaim Tzanze said that Tovshin Pei Aleph is Me'ash Beis Yonam Evyon. Tovshin Pei Aleph is Ash Beis, Aleph Shin Pei Tov, Me'ash Beis Yonam Evyon. And of course, you all know that they found the ha'ara from the Rebbe in the Teres Menachem, in the Sefer HaSichos. I think Tovshin Nun, maybe Nun Aleph, where the Rebbe wrote that there's Af and there's Pei. Af, which means the nose, has the connotation that's negative, anger. But Pei is positive. And Pei is Ploi Sarenu, the Rebbe said. Ploi Sarenu. And if you look at that ha'ara in the Sikha, you'll see that the Rebbe says you have to be Mavad, you have to turn around the nose. So the Pasha's turning around the nose is from Af into Pei, from Arenu Plois to Ploi Sarenu. But on a deeper level, you want Taka should be the Arenu Plois, and the Arenu Plois should be positive. Because the Rebbe spoke in Nun Aleph that Arenu before Plois means that the Eibush himself shows us the Moifse. And Plois Arenu means that a person has to show us the Moifse. And the Rebbe said the difference between Plois Arenu and Arenu Plois is Plois Arenu is before Mashiach. And Arenu Plois is this Gals of Malach HaMashiach. Okay, Aksiva Achsima Teva, Shana Teva, look at all of you. Sei alle gesund und stark. And next time I come on, if you show me your face, I won't tell anybody that you were here. Okay, Kol Tuv Seller.
Rabbi Paltiel, thank you very much. I do want to say that everyone is welcome to listen to Rabbi Paltiel's Inside Chassidus.